And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, Kenneth Gruenfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Tuesday. We have a lot to talk about on today's show, but before we get into that, I just want to remind you guys to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to go to streamelements.com/GSMCsportsnetwork./tip. Again, that really helps the show, and that's to, get your comment, to stand out of all of the other comments in the chat. So we greatly appreciate that, and I make sure to highlight that during the stream. And then for bonus coverage materials that are not covered by this broadcast, make sure to go to patreon.com and search up GSMC Sports Network, and that is where you can find all the exclusive content from not just my podcast, but the other podcasts as well here on the GSMC Sports Network. A bunch of the baseball ones and football ones are up there now, so make sure to go check that out as well. We got a lot to talk about on today's show. We'll start off by recapping last night's game between the Vikings and the 49ers, so I have a lot of thoughts about that. Then we'll get into the next segment. We'll talk about some teams that are struggling right now, what the issues are. So we'll get into that in the next segment. Then in the third part of the show, we'll talk about the Baltimore Ravens and how far they can go this season after getting a huge win over the Lions, a blowout win over the Lions, 38-6. So we'll talk about them. And then in the final part of the show, we'll go over the current standings as they are right now after Week 7. So that's what we got on tap for today. So let's get right into the first part of the show, which is recapping last night's game between the 49ers and the Vikings. So the Vikings, an upset win, 22-17 over the 49ers. So obviously, after the show I came out with, obviously after the show I come out with shorts. So I did my shorts for the baseball podcast because obviously we don't have that till Friday. So I last night was both championship series games, Game 6 in the National League and Game 7 in the American League. And then, of course, you had this game last night. Last night, I had the Niners winning, of course. I had the Astros winning, and I had the Phillies winning. And guess what? All three of those teams lost. So, going forward, whatever predictions that I may have for games, just go with the opposite. Because, ever since I've been doing predictions for the NFL on this show, I've been terrible. And I guess you could say I might be one of the reasons why the Niners lost last night, because I went with them. And I gave the Vikings really no chance, especially because the Niners were coming off of a loss against the Browns in Cleveland. And I thought this was going to be a get-right game for them because the Vikings, obviously they won last week against the Bears, but, I just still didn't look at them as a good team. And I thought, going up against the 49ers, Kirk Cousins on Monday night, he was going to struggle. And, the Niners were going to win pretty easily, right? But that was not the case. That was not the case last night. So the Vikings got the ball to start the game. Alexander Madison started off the game with, I believe, a 19-yard run. So I was like, okay, didn't expect that. The Vikings, next two plays, no gain, and then an interception on the third play. So 49ers got the ball, and I'm like, all right, well, here we go. This is going to be pure domination. Niners are driving. Looks like they're going to score on this drive, and then Christian McCaffrey fumbles right after that. And I'm like, okay, well, Vikings are backed up, so, the Niners, all they got to do is just stop them here, get the ball back. And then the Vikings proceeded to go on a 10-play, 89-yard drive that took over 6 minutes and ended up getting a touchdown. Kirk Cousins connected with Jordan Addison for 20 yards for a touchdown. And it was 7-0 Vikings. And I'm sitting there going, okay, didn't really expect that. That's not good. And then the Niners got the ball back. They went down the field, 10 plays, 53 yards. And Moody missed another field goal from 40 yards out. And I'm like, okay, that is not good. Vikings then proceeded to go up 10-0. But then the Niners put together a nice drive, 12 plays, 75 yards, 6.5 minutes. This is in the second quarter. Christian McCaffrey ended up scoring yet another touchdown, rushing touchdown from 3 yards out. So it was 10-7. So I'm like, okay, now the Niners, they look like they're going to, get back into this game, and they're probably going to win it. They just got off to a rough start. Then the Vikings got the ball back, not a lot of time left. And it looked like there was going to be another interception when Kirk Cousins was throwing to Jordan Addison, but Addison was able to rip it away and score a 60-yard touchdown right before the end of the half, and that put the Vikings up 16-7. They missed the extra point. Niners come out of this and punt in the second half. Vikings kick another field goal. Christian McCaffrey scored a touchdown on the following drive, a 35-yard passing touchdown by Brock Purdy, even though that was really all McCaffrey on that play. Vikings kicked a field goal. Niners kicked a field goal. And then in the fourth quarter, we had Vikings punting. Brock Purdy threw a pick. Vikings got the ball, missed a field goal. Brock Purdy threw another pick to end the game. And that was it. Vikings won 22-17. Yeah, Kirk Cousins had a great game. 35 for 45, 378 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. That was obviously at the beginning of the game. Vikings still didn't. I mean, they ran the ball a little bit better, but they still not great. Madison 39 yards rushing, Akers 31 yards rushing. They ran for a grand total of 74 yards. Jordan Addison was the star last night. 7 receptions for 123 yards and 2 touchdowns. T.J. Hawkinson had 11 receptions for 86 yards. He got banged up in this game. Him and Addison actually had to leave the games at points during the game because they got hurt. Addison trying to make a catch and got his foot trapped underneath. I think it was Ward. I think that's who, because that's who got the pick to start the game, and then the Addison touchdown, and the same thing. It was them fighting for the ball, and Addison was able to win that battle that time. But yeah, he got hurt in this game, but he came back in. Him and Hawkinson both came back in. Brandon Powell, he had 4 receptions for 64 yards. KJ Osborne had 5 for 47. Yeah, I mean, a great game for Kirk Cousins, really. He was unbelievable. Brock Purdy last night, 21 of 30, 272 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 picks. Niners really didn't run the ball that well. McCaffrey was their leading rusher for 45 yards and a touchdown. George Kittle was their leading receiver. He had 78 yards receiving. Brandon Ayuk had 57. Juwan Jennings had 54. McCaffrey had 51. Again, the 35-yard touchdown was the big chunk of his receiving yards. But yeah, I mean, the big story is here. Niners defense was very bad last night. Outside of the interception, I mean, they didn't sack Kirk Cousins at all. I thought that was like my biggest takeaway from that game is, or one of them, is the fact that the 49ers did not sack Kirk Cousins once. And that offensive line for the Niners really held up. It did. Or for the Vikings, it held up. And I really didn't think it was. I mean, Kirk Cousins did not. I mean, there was at one point during the game where they should have sacked him. It was towards the end, and he was able to get out of it, and they didn't get him. And yeah, I mean, if you want to look at the weakness of the 49ers, I guess the secondary is a problem. But then again, you got the front seven is always getting to the quarterback, so it really doesn't matter. But last night it did matter because, I mean, the Vikings picked apart that Niners defense last night. I mean, the Vikings, they only punted, I think, once in this game. Yeah. They only punted once in this game. That was it. I mean, they had the turnover early, but, the missed field goals, the interception. But other than that, they scored touchdowns. They did kick field goals, but still, they only punted one time. And yeah, the Niners just couldn't get any stops, especially on third down too. Like the Vikings were really good on third down last night. I mean, anytime you thought, okay, all they got to do is get one more stop, and that didn't happen. That didn't happen. Let's see. Let me see if I can find the what the percentage was on third down, because I was watching First Take and they went over it. Let's see if I can find. I don't know why I'm having. All right, here we go. Yeah, so third down efficiency, Vikings were 8 for 13, Niners were 5 for 9. But the Vikings had a total of 452 yards against the Niners defense. They won time of possessions. They had the ball for 34, or well, almost 35 minutes, 34-56 to the Niners 25-04. They picked up 24 first downs in this game. I mean, I was very surprised by this game. I really was. But this kind of raises a lot of questions now, with Brock Purdy, because he threw 2 bad interceptions, especially the one at the end of the game. And, he was out without Deebo Samuel. There was no Trent Williams. So, the last 2 games have not been great for the Niners. And they got, Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner got banged up in this game, but they returned to the game. So, at least that's good. But, yeah, this was definitely a very bad loss for the Niners. Everybody's now, for the people talking about Brock Purdy being a system quarterback, well, they could definitely use this for their argument, because he was not good last night. He wasn't. And, again, he's not the main reason they lost. He is one of the reasons why they lost, but I wouldn't say he's the main reason. I mean, the defense just couldn't get off the field on third down. They missed a field goal. McCaffrey fumbling. I mean, there's a lot of things you could point at besides him, but yeah, I mean, the 2 turnovers, that was bad. That was bad. But, I give props to the Vikings because, again, I'm one of those people that counted them out, especially with their best receiver, being placed on IR, and Justin Jefferson. But Jordan Addison stepped up. Kirk Cousins played really well with really no running game. Even though they did run the ball better, but still, they won the game by throwing the ball last night. And that was against a good team on Monday night, and that's something that he's struggled with in the past. So the Vikings now are 3-4, and they're kind of back in the conversation for that last spot, for the wild card in the NFC. And then as for the Niners, these last 2 weeks have been bad. I'm not going to say that, to go into a full-on panic with them, but I definitely would be a little bit concerned because, especially, you look at their field goal kicker, and I know, he made, a 50-yarder last night, but, he did miss one early, and, last week he missed some kicks as well, so, that's something to be concerned about, and the secondary, too. I mean, they got picked apart. When they didn't get any pressure on Kirk Cousins, they got picked apart last night. And if they go up against the Eagles, you don't get any pressure on Jalen Hurts, that's going to be a problem. And especially in the playoffs, you go up against some of these better teams besides the Eagles, because the Eagles are going to be there. If you don't get pressure, is your back end going to hold up? It did not hold up last night. So. So Vikings pick up a win. They improved to 3-4. Niners dropped to 5-2. So we'll see what happens next week. The Packers, they will be playing the Vikings. Well, the Vikings will be playing the Packers in Lambeau next week. And then for the 49ers, they got the Bengals coming to town next week. So that's a big game there. So with that, we're going to take our first break of the show. And then when we come back, I'm going to give you my thoughts on, the 49ers still, and some other teams that are struggling as well. Specifically the Buffalo Bills. So that'll be what we talk about when we get back from our first break. So stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.